This is Synopsis, a series of conversations on compositional practice in the framework of Abeceda Institute. My name is Neža Zupanc, and with me today is Vicente Olave. Welcome. Thank you for taking your time, and I kindly ask you for a short introduction to begin with.
Thank you, Nessa, for the invitation. Well, my name is Vicente Olave. I'm a composer from Chile, and I basically started my studies in bachelor in composition there with composers Miguel Letelier and Andrés Maupoint. After that, well, most of the time I was premiering my works in Chile, and then I came here to Germany to study a master in composition, which lasted about 2 years in Detmold. And well, right now I just finished the master, and in the coming days I'm moving to Würzburg to continue my studies in what will be a program of Meisterklasse, which in some other places of Germany is also known as concert examen, which is also focused on composition.
So you started in Chile, which is your home country, right?
Yeah, right.
How did you begin with music? Did you start with playing an instrument, with instrumental practice, or how did you start?
I would say my interest in music started by listening. I can think of two main sources of inspiration. One of them was because of my father. He really likes to listen to what we consider classical, romantic, academic music, and yeah, I know and remember that he has a huge collection of CDs and also cassettes that most of the time when I was by his place, he will listen to them constantly, and in that way I became aware of this kind of music and I started to like it a lot also. It was my first introduction to composers like Mozart, Beethoven, Mendelssohn, well, basically classical music, romantic, baroque, and even some composers from the 20th century. That was also a very interesting era for me because there wasn't that much material in those CDs, but every time I listened to them, they always caught my attention because each one of the pieces and the composers from those CDs were really different one from each other in comparison to what I learned from listening to romantic music and classical, for example.
And when did you encounter composition or the first thought of studying it, of composing?
I think I was more introduced like because of the piano. Thanks to that instrument, I started learning more basic pieces. Well, I consider myself attaining a very high level of playing the instrument, but it was good enough to enjoy the pieces and to use it as a tool for creation, basically. It was thanks to the piano that I was starting to get interested in creating my own stuff and see where I go with that. And in the end, I discovered that within the music, I really like the creative part, like making something, creating something new from zero, and then take a look at how that creation went into life. I found that experience amazing.
Hmm. And how did the one of the first compositions sound like, look like? Is it, yeah, if you remember?
Oh, yeah, most of the pieces that I tried in my first years were basically very simple piano pieces. Um, yeah, for me it sounded interesting, but I remember when I sometimes show it to my first piano teacher there, and he usually told me like, every time I came with something, he does, this kind of sounds like similar to Bartok, or this has some feeling of Prokofiev. That way also was interesting for me because when I thought, I think it happens to most of people who start composing, like they're trying to make something new, but in your first steps, it's normally going to sound very similar to other composers.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And what about this trying to do something new? And what is your, how do you look at this now, today? As composition, a bit more broadly, the way you practice it. Uh, is it still trying to do something new? How do you look at this?
Mm. Nowadays, I think it's more about challenging myself, and most of the time it has to do with investigation, and searching for themes or subjects that are useful as motivations for me to embark on a new piece. That way, I would consider myself someone who really likes to study a lot of the either the techniques of an instrument or analyze the structure of a piece and get most of the information from out of it before I set to the phase of start writing and sketching what I want to create.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Uh, so this is already now, in a sense, partly about the process of how you compose today, right? Um,
Mm.
if we continue on that path, uh, what are the most important things in your compositional process?
Mm, yeah, it's a bit hard to describe. I think, well, first of all, the most important thing is I have to like it, and so it doesn't matter how how structured I am, how professional I am. If what I'm writing doesn't convince me, then it doesn't make much sense to me to compose. So that way, ideally, I'm someone who really likes to feel like there's a clear and objective path, so to say, to create something. And I would say most of the time, from the last pieces that I wrote in the last 2 years, there's been some kind of consistency of what are the process I try to write music and to compose. But at the same time, I'm very open to accept that sometimes my music needs to start from somewhere completely different. What I would consider like a normal process for me that usually works, it's first starting to, well, have a basic idea, and from there, basically doing a lot of research. Like if I know that I have a setting of instruments, I'll try to investigate as much as possible about those instruments to analyze pieces that are mostly in the same setting of instrument, like for ensemble or for duo, which contain those instruments, and then from there getting inspiration or also trying to learn from them. So when I apply them to my own pieces, I can also now know what I'm doing with them. From there, when I feel more secure or ready for composing, it's normally when I feel like I reach when I got more knowledge about my investigation, and at the same time when I feel more inspired with ideas that I recollected throughout that first phase, and then it would be to start writing the piece. Normally, it starts as I let myself go like in a as an impulse to create, and from there I try to when once that first impulse is done, or I feel it's getting weaker, then I try to think a bit more colder and then try to construct from there.
On a specific case, for example, the composition a lo largo della ruta, would that be one example of this process, in a sense?
Mm. I think not 100% accurate with what I normally do. Well, I think normally it's usually not the case. There are also always some exceptions within that framework. But yeah, with that piece for vibraphone, I well, I have a very fixed idea because it was for a call for scores, which was making a piece for solo vibraphone with a duration of 5 to 7 minutes, and your main inspiration has to be from a piece or a song that you like really much from your homeland, from your country.
Mm-hmm.
And in that regard, yeah, it was pretty clear that I had to work with a piece that I really like from Chile. In this case, it's a piano piece by Alfonso Lenk, the Dolora number one, which is part of the set of 5 pieces with the same name but numbers from different numbers. And I feel like uh, they are really short pieces, but at the same time they are really intense. So I thought that intensity was really worth it to work with that and to translate it into new ideas that could express by the vibraphone. So, well, that was from one part like the inspiration for that piece, and on the other side was the challenge to write an expressive piece for the vibraphone, which I never did. So I already have some experience with vibraphone, but more with ensembles and bigger group of musicians, but never with solo. So um, in there was this kind of first phase where I tried to look as many solo vibraphone pieces as I could, and from there getting some ideas or trying to think how to use the vibraphone in a way that I could represent, make justice to that Dolora from Alfonso Le.
To return back to the overview of your practice, you were mentioning the starting with a basic idea. So, what happens before that? How do you find the starting basic idea? How do you choose it? Does it appear? Where does it come from?
No, I think that when I refer to the basic idea, it's something very abstract because sometimes it's more like something that a feeling that I have or something that some kind of sound impulse that I can listen in my head, but I don't know yet how to really translate that feeling or that sense into real music. Like there's this abstract feeling that I know it makes me feel that there's something interesting there, but it feels really abstract and like a very unpolished, like something that has to be formed with some kind of tools that I don't have because I need to get them out from my mind.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And is this connected to how you studied throughout your years of composition education? Is this something that you learned there, or is this something that it more, I don't know, you already brought in, you already knew before? Do you connect that to your studies? Do you see, is it a part of a perhaps some tradition, Chilean tradition or German tradition? Where do you think that started?
Mm. I think that it definitely started during my bachelor studies.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't say if that kind of mindset is really like German or Chilean or some kind of other kind of origin, but um, something that really stood out for me was um, one, the importance of analyzing not only music but are like anything that awakes some interest in you and learn how to analyze it, and from there you basically get knowledge and tools on how to use that to your advantage. I feel like from one part it was the importance of analyzing music. um, I think the university where and the teachers who taught me about the tools to analyze really was important for me because that way and basically not only I was able to check any kind of music that I got interested to see and to try to explain why it was interest for me, and that way learning and getting more ideas that could be useful for me into my composition, and at the same time this ability of being able to analyze something within a piece, extrapolate that ability and use it on other areas that are not strictly related to music. For example, could be to literature or movies or any kind of media that sparkled some interest in me. Like I think from throughout my studies there, um, I think I started realizing that I'm a really structured person, and at least ideally, I really like um, to to approach anything that seems useful for me in a more rational way, or at least trying to dissect it and separate it in parts in which I can find some characteristic or elements that I feel are the key of that kind of inspiration or emotion that it's trying to impress me within that piece.
So, in a sense, to understand why it it interests you, if I understand correct, to
Yeah.
understand the reason of. I see. What is what are the findings there?
Oh,
It can be on a
well,
specific case, on a specific composition, um, or on a specific starting idea that you did this and perhaps discovered the reason, discovered the root of interest.
oh, right now I can't think of something like really like a very particular case.
Mm-hmm.
Like, mm I think the easiest way to remember something would be when learning about some extended techniques or techniques that I don't understand yet how do they work, but at the same time I find them really interesting. For example, mm, bassoon bassoon multiphonics, like it's basically like, well, understanding there's some phenomenon, but at the same time, yeah, man. In that regard, for that technique is like not understanding like 100% like what is the musician doing, but what aspects of that sound is seem intrinsic to me, and something I could only notice like while analyzing like the multiphonics within that instrument is that every time the pressure change from for the reed to go from a normal note into the multiphonic, there was always this really small glissando that felt a bit microtonal. Um, and it was very interesting because it's the fact that I knew about that in reality wasn't going to change the sound, but the fact that I became aware of that, like, I for me it was a bit. I wouldn't say a revelation, but it was another way of understanding, like how it worked in that way.
Right. Sometimes, in my experience, learning a particular thing like this also uh, in connection, of course, with the experience of hearing it, also opens up a new level of um, detail that you can perceive in sound. Then, um, but that's just what I perhaps notice sometimes. Um, Continuing with the compositional practice. Um, and the key aspects that is your compositional practice. Um, what else would you note when we are speaking about most important key aspects that you consider with when composing?
Mm. Yeah, I think to answer that question, I'll need to go back to the first answer because yeah, I spoke about two things that stood out for me,
Mm-hmm.
and the second one is I think is directly related to this new question, which is about mm, basically when I was having lessons with my first composition teacher, the bachelor. He was more of a what we could consider in Chile a composer of the old school. like most of the teachers that were in my university back then in Chile were more interested in or were more skilled in techniques or music from the second half of the 20th century onward. Um, this other composer was I would say from another generation where there still was a very strong focus on traditional techniques, and he also was very he took very steps forwards in experimenting with whatever he felt was interesting throughout his career. And something that he told me that always stood in my mind when trying to compose is that in his music he basically uses anything that he finds useful to express within his music. That means, in a broader sense, to not restrict yourself to one aesthetic or to one way of thinking music, but if you feel like something, if you feel like you need to do something, even if there are logical limitations to that, or your mind tells you maybe that's not correct in a structural manner, or it doesn't feel like it doesn't seems to be logically the answer, but you have this gut feeling that you need to use this tool to go forward, then that's the answer to go. Um, I think I think it's really useful if you are aware of it, because I think it's sometimes also like a double-edged sword. Like you have this freedom of not being attached to a very strict process. Like for example, like you could use maybe your harmony is more modal based, but then there are some sections where you need to make some radical changes because you feel that's the correct thing to do and you have the means to do it. At the same time, I think making those kind of decisions also comes with a very high risk, high reward situation.
Is that something that one can, or you see as something that one can grow, practice? Or is it always, because if it's high risk, is it always very open what the result will be? Is it something that you through the practice can, that more practice can provide more guarantee of it? Or is it always the high risk that stays?
I think if it's starting to become a guarantee, then it's it's becoming part of your system, and that well, I can't tell that yet because I feel like I'm still as a composer. I feel like some of my pieces are facing like these kind of moments where there's like I see like there's potential, um, but sometimes there's like a safer path where it feels a bit more predictable, but it, in more in a sense within the same piece, it's not like a guarantee, but it almost always finished in a correct way to end a piece or to develop something where this high risk, high reward normally gets you to a very to new places where sometimes you could get something really good from it and make your piece way better, but sometimes it could lead to total failure and then your piece it's I wouldn't say it's trash, but it's more it ends up more like an attempt that you can get from some lessons from it than a successful project.
And what makes a good piece a good piece? What are your standards for that?
Mm. Oh, that's a really tricky question. My most simple answer would be something that I find either interesting or that simply motivates me, or basically a piece that moves me inside, that impress me.
So
But
that's the
that
main criteria.
Yeah, but that strong impression could mean a lot of things. Like that strong impression could be achieved listening to the piece from a maybe from a historical point of view, or from a intellectual point of view, or just by feeling that it was the correct way to make the piece.
And if we move to your studies further, you said now you just concluded your master's at Detmold. Uh, in your thesis, perhaps can you tell us what was the subject that you treated in your thesis for this compositional degree?
Oh yeah. Well, for my master arbeit, I end up writing a piece for. It was in its origins. It was a duo for violin and piano, which was heavily focused on this theme of making very short pieces. And at that time, I was really interested in working with as little as possible in means of time, like trying to express something that that's normally really brief. Some of these pieces are could be around 30 seconds. Some of them are a bit longer, but some of them could last even 6 seconds or so. So so my main motivation to work on this last project on my master was to go all the way out with this format of very short pieces that by themselves are they don't mean anything in particular, or they don't make a lasting appeal to hear one of them as a separate piece, but trying to make all of them mm, construct an atmosphere throughout the whole collection.
What kind of atmosphere?
Mm, I would say it could be kind of contemplative. I was with this idea. Well, the piece is called the Forgotten Islets, and it has to do with this idea that the islets are very small masses of lands in the sea, or in basically water spaces that normally they don't have even names, and they are so small that usually nobody is there, or not even life can be developed there. So I was interested in that idea, and I tried to make some kind of landscape within many of these islets that musically represents also this idea that by themselves they don't recreate a life in means of recreating sensical music or even interesting music, which it's a bit weird to say. But at the same time, when you see everything throughout, and you feel like this impression that it's something worth checking out, and it's an experience worth going through.
And what is the total duration of this? Is this the half an hour Forgotten Islands?
Oh yeah, that's the video. Like the original piece was around 21 to 24 minutes.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
That was the result of the premiere, which was some months, like at the semester before the my last concert.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And after that, I tried to go even further, and because when I listened to the piece the first time, I noticed the piece was not only about what was within the music, but what was between the pieces. There was an opportunity of using those pauses that wasn't explored in the premiere. So one of the ideas that I got was to create another set of pieces in a similar way, this time for solo oboe. And these pieces will interact, intertwined with the violin piano duo.
So that's the side quests.
Yeah. Forgotten Islets refer to the all the pieces that are played by the violin and the piano, and the side quests are all these small pieces that are played by the oboe.
I see. So the pauses between are actually pauses between multiple separate compositions, really short compositions, if now I understand correct.
Yeah, exactly.
I see. It's not so. I didn't know when I listened. It seems like a whole altogether. So, why is it? Why is it important that, or what is your experience with having a performance available, being able to hear what you composed, and developing, adding onto it? What do you learn from there on this specific case?
Mm. On this piece specifically, well, I would start like from any kind of new piece that I premiere. The first thing is confirming what you expected, what you were sure about the piece, what would work, and how how much of what you wrote on what you imagined about the piece is actually what is being played in reality. I mean, how accurate was your your work translated into the music. And well, I think there's always you can always expect a bit more or less of okay, I expected that, or I was this moment was exactly like I was thinking, but when you get more specific, that's when you listen to more surprises that I wasn't aware that this would work this way, or at this moment didn't work as good as I imagined because this happened, and all that experience of having it performed lets you know in more detail about situations that are happening, not only related to the music itself, but also with the reality that you are also working with performers, and those performers are also on a stage, and some things might work better or might not work that well depending on the situation. For example, if you have a piece that is extremely precise in having a really soft dynamic, you have to be really aware that the hole that it's going to be played has the acoustic necessary to appreciate the softness, and even so, to maybe expect even the bare minimum outside factor could affect the perception of the real moment, which is the performance of the piece.
Right. Do you compose with that in mind, or do you do you adapt situation to situation? Since I imagine with many of the performances of your compositions, you can be at the site, you can hear the rehearsal, right? Do you fine tune that also then in the rehearsal process, or do you know already where a certain composition will be performed?
Yeah, about space and where it's going to be performed. Yeah, I would say in luckily in the last couple of years, I'm more aware and or I know where it's going to be specifically played. Um, it's not that my pieces are composed for a space, but I know that there are some advantages or disadvantages of performing something on different spaces. For example, this duo misspell for bassoon and soprano, which is basically it's chamber music. I had in mind to be only performed in chamber scenarios, but then it got the opportunity to be played in the concert house, which was a really big space was basically a theater where you normally expect to listen
An orchestra.
to an orchestra. So that case wasn't something I was expecting because there weren't any plans originally to perform it there, but then we got the opportunity, and we just have to adapt to see which kind of solutions were the best to represent the performance as best as possible as we could.
Right, right. And to yeah, jumping to today, what compositions are you currently working with, and what do you see in the future of your composition? Where do you want to go with it? What are your goals in composition?
Yeah, right now my main focus at this moment is working on the parts of a orchestra piece that I wrote a long time ago, which originally won the composition competition in Chile, but due to certain circumstances related to social reasons back in the day, and then COVID happened, so the piece could never be played. But this year, there's a strong possibility that piece can be performed as it was intended a long time ago. So now I'm preparing the material, so when they ask me for it, I just give it to them and they can play it on Chile.
Great. And in terms of future, uh, where do where are you? What do you see for the future of your compositional practice?
No, right now I feel like my biggest interest in me as a composer would be to expand once again in the number of musicians that I'm working with in bigger ensembles, for example, because I realized after my bachelor, I kind of did like a instrumental restart, like starting again from very small projects in terms of number of musicians. So these last years have been more pieces for solo pieces or small ensembles. And I think right now I have this feeling that I want to go bigger again, going for ensembles bigger than 6 musicians, or going again with probably string orchestra or even a full orchestra again, because I think a lot of time has passed, and I want to see what I'm capable of with these bigger ensembles. How the ideas that I express myself in the smaller formats can now work on bigger ensembles.
What do you see as the main difference, apart from the obvious, when you compose for a larger ensemble?
Mm, I think something I would need to check or to think about it in terms of composing, maybe how I conceive my creation. It's trying to see the bigger picture within these bigger ensembles, because well, the thing that has worked for me working smaller is that I can really focus on the most specific details of each instrument, or at least as specific as I like to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like if I work bigger, that could either take me so much time that I would fail basically the deadlines, or I will need to make a different approach on how to conceive those ideas in a way that I feel satisfied being specific about my own the impressions that I want to make in a piece, and the dynamics that has to be respected in a bigger group of people.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Uh, Great. So, since we are approaching the conclusion, I would love to hear from you for two messages, which I always ask of composers in synopsis. The first one is a message for anyone that is aspiring to start composing. And the second one is a message for anyone that will go and listen to your compositions after hearing this.
I will start with the second one. Mm, I think, yeah, normally we composers have a lot of ideas, and normally the case is people think that you need to understand like the whole idea behind the piece in order to enjoy it, but I feel I prefer to people to take an approach of just listening and checking the music, and if they got interested, then getting to know what it was about. I think at least that's my kind of approach when I go with new music that I don't know. If I listen for a first time and then I got there was something interesting for me, then I want to go a bit deeper of what was the intention of the composer, and then maybe going for a second time for some replay value, in the sense that you know have more memories about that piece that you just listened, and now you're going from a new perspective, and that new listening could be better, but it's a guarantee that it will be different, and that I think that's a good experience all along. And about aspiring composers, I would just say just go on, and mm, it's a bit tricky to give some advice, because everybody has their own method or their own way of conceiving ideas. But yeah, from my perspective, it could be useful to um, just start doing something. When you feel out of ideas, look at yourself, look at what you've done, and from there, if you want to go onward with that ideas, you can make a system out of it. You can recognize what are you doing, how many times have you done that, and from there, you can create like your own theory based on your own music world.
Vicente Olave, thank you very much for sharing.
Uh, Thanks to you for the invitation. It was a very nice time talking about music and composition.